Pleasure now to introduce Celine Condorelli, who works with art and architecture. She is the author and editor of Support Structures, Sternberg Prize 2009, and one of the founding directors of East Side Projects in Birmingham, UK. Her recent projects include developing support structure phase 1 to 10 with artist curator Gavin Wade in various locations. Celine is also a guest professor at the Nuremberg Art Academy. Celine Condorelli has been involved with the Park Nights in 2008 and also in our sleepover at the Serpentine Gallery in 2010. She will present here for the Map Marathon Il n'y a plus rien, there is nothing left, about the city of Alexandria, which she just presented at Manifesta 8. A very warm welcome to Celine Condorelli.
In this presentation I will attempt, as Hans-Ulrich just mentioned, to map aspects of the city of Alexandria in Egypt, how it appears in the world. As a city that exists, it is there, and is home to some of its inhabitants, and yet seems to have disappeared for some of its previous others. As a city that endured multiple erasures in time and space, and yet was not physically destroyed by natural or human disasters. Throughout its history, Alexandria is the city that once was. She said of the city where she grew up, Il n'y a plus rien, there is nothing left. First movement. The first movement explores the relationship between the Egyptian cotton industry and the people who were its primary owners, most of whom left Egypt after the revolution in 1956 when the industry was nationalized. The first movement begins in Alexandria in the first half of the 20th century and ends today at the now closed cotton mills of Lancashire, England. There is a cotton plant with unusually long silky fibers that grows in the Nile Delta. They called it the white gold of Egypt. Twice a year, the warehouses of Minat el-Bassal on the edge of the city fill up with raw cotton to be cleaned and packed tightly into sacks. For a long time, cotton used to then be transported on British ships and processed into cloth in the mills of Lancashire in England, before being re-exported throughout the British Empire. Eventually, all the cotton mills closed down and were either demolished or became museums of an industry and its failings. What we know of ourselves includes everything we know about the world, but also what we are missing and longing, and what did not take place but could have. Remembering, in this case, is not an act of nostalgic yearning for times and places that used to be, but rather a vehicle for posing questions and linking knowledge to action. What are the histories and struggles that help shape and yet are erased by the present as we see it? So I went back to the reference when I was a student. It's a book called The Image of the City by Kevin Lynch. He writes, "Although clarity or legibility is by no means the only important property of a city, it is of special importance when considering environment at the urban scale of size, time, and complexity. To understand this, we must consider not just the city as a thing in itself, but the city being perceived by its inhabitants." And he continues, "In the process of wayfinding, the strategic link is the environmental image, the generalized mental picture of the world that is held by an individual. This image is the product both of immediate sensation and of the memory of past experience, and it is used to interpret information and to guide action. The need to recognize and pattern our surroundings is so crucial and has such long roots in the past that this image has wide practical and emotional importance to the individual. An ordered environment may serve as a broad frame of reference, an organizer of activity, belief, or knowledge. A vivid and integrated physical setting capable of producing a sharp image plays a social role as well. It can furnish the raw material for the symbols and collective memories of group communication." Timothy Mitchell, though, in Colonizing Egypt, writes, "As he moved on towards the towns of Palestine, Nerval remembered Egypt as something no more solid or real than the painted scenery of a theater set. Just as well that the 6 months I spent there are over, it is already nothing, I have seen so many places collapse behind my steps, like stage sets. What do I have left from them? An image as confused as that of a dream. The best of what one finds there, I already knew by heart. Gautier, for his part, wrote that if the visitor to Egypt has long inhabited in his dreams a certain town, he will carry it in his head as an imaginary map, difficult indeed to erase, even when he finds himself facing the reality. His own map of Egyptian cities, he explained, is built with the materials of 1001 Nights and arranges itself around Marilat's Place de l'Espéquier, a remarkable and violent painting. The attentive European, wrote Flaubert in Cairo, rediscovers here much more than he discovers. The Orient was something one only ever rediscovered, to be grasped representationally as the reiteration of an earlier description. Language plays an enormous importance in how biography merges history and myth with the prosaic and the trivial, through texts both present and absent, histories and stories of histories, and with names that stand for themselves but also point towards other possible or improbable meanings. Language articulates visual perception and orders the seen and the concealed, images sense from nonsense. In this way, thresholds and frontiers appear and disappear. Reflections are created, illusions, apparitions, doubles, associations. So how do things cease to appear? How do images become mute? How does a landscape, political, social, or urban, and its images become incomprehensible, unintelligible, while simultaneously retain some presence? What type of destruction has taken place when someone says of a city, there is nothing left? I had to ask someone who can talk about things that are not there, to things that have been put away. I asked Avery Gordon, the great sociologist of haunting and author of Ghostly Matters. She answered with that great little book of the space of absence, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. She reads,
in Ersilia, to establish the relationships that sustain the city's life, the inhabitants stretch strings from the corners of the houses, white or black or gray or black and white, according to whether they mark a relationship of blood, of trade, authority, agency. When the strings become so numerous that you can no longer pass among them, the inhabitants leave. Their houses are dismantled, only the strings and their supports remain. From a mountainside, camping with their household goods, Ersilia's refugees look at the labyrinth of taut strings and poles that rise in the plain. That is the city of Ersilia still, and they are nothing. They rebuild Ersilia elsewhere. They weave a similar pattern of strings which they would like to be more complex and at the same time more regular than the other. Then they abandon it and take themselves and their houses still further away. Thus, when traveling in the territory of Ersilia, you come upon the ruins of abandoned cities, without the walls which do not last, without the bones of the dead which the wind rolls away, spiderwebs of intricate relationships seeking a form.
Timothy Mitchell continues. Like Gérard de Nerval and others before him, Melville wrote of wanting to withdraw from the maze of streets in order to see the place as a picture or plan. He complained in his journal that there was no plan to streets, a perfect labyrinth, narrow, close, shut in. If one but could get up aloft, but no. No names to the streets, no numbers, no anything. Like Nerval, Melville found no point of view within the city and therefore no picture. What this meant in turn was that there seemed to be no plan. The separation of an observer from an object world was something a European experienced in terms of a code or map. He expected there to be something that was somehow set apart from things themselves, as a guide, a sign, a map, a text, or a set of instructions about how to proceed. But in the Middle Eastern city, nothing stood apart and addressed itself in this way to the outsider, to the observing subject. The city refused to offer itself as a representation of something because it had not been built as one. It had not been arranged, that is, to effect the presence of some separate plan or meaning. To colonize Egypt, to construct a modern kind of power, it would be necessary to determine the plan. It's my 5 minutes. A plan or framework would create the appearance of objectness that Melville found lacking by seeming to separate an object world from its observer. This sort of framework is not just a plan that colonialism would bring to Egypt, but an effect it would build in. The colonial process would try and reorder Egypt to appear as a world enframed. A framework appears to order things, but also to circumscribe and exclude. A framework sets up the impression of something beyond the picture world it enframes. It promises a truth that lies outside its world of material representation. To determine the plan is to build in an effect of order and an effect of truth. I had to go back to Kevin Lynch. Like a piece of architecture, the city is a construction in space, but one of vast scale, a thing perceived only in the course of long spans of time. At every instant, there is more than the eye can see, more than the ear can hear. Nothing is experienced by itself, but always in relationship to its surroundings, the sequences of events leading up to it, the memory of past experiences. Most often, our perception of the city is not sustained, but rather partial, fragmentary, mixed with other concerns. And he continues, there are indications that the image may be a continuous field, the disturbance of one element in some ways affecting all others. Even the recognition of an object is as much dependent on context as on the form of the object itself. The disturbance of large-scale construction affects more than its immediate environment. Rather than a single comprehensive image for the entire environment, there seems to be sets of images, which more or less overlap and interrelate. Images may differ not only by the scale of area involved, but by viewpoint, time of day, or season. In order to accomplish this continuity in the face of sensuous confusion, many observers drain their images of visual content using abstraction. These will operate both day and night, driving or walking, rain or shine, albeit with some effort and loss. The map of a city is not a precise, miniaturized model of reality, reduced in scale and consistently abstracted. As a purposive simplification, it is made by reducing, eliminating, or even adding elements to reality, by fusion and distortion, by relating and structuring the parts. It is sufficient, perhaps better, for its purpose, if rearranged, distorted, or illogical. Avery continues.
Those who arrive at Thekla can see little of the city beyond the plank fences, the sackcloth screens, the scaffoldings, the metal armatures, the wooden catwalks hanging from ropes or supported by sawhorses, the ladders, the trestles. If you ask, why is Thekla's construction taking such a long time? The inhabitants continue hoisting sacks, lowering leaded strings, moving long brushes up and down as they answer, so that its destruction cannot begin. And if asked whether they fear that once the scaffoldings are removed, the city may begin to crumble and fall to pieces, they add hastily in a whisper, not only the city. If dissatisfied with the answers, someone puts his eye to a crack in a fence, he sees cranes pulling up other cranes, scaffoldings that embrace other scaffoldings, beams that prop up other beams. What meaning does your construction have, he asks. What is the aim of a city under construction unless it is a city? Where is the plan you are following, the blueprint? We will show it to you as soon as the working day is over. We cannot interrupt our work now, they answer. Work stops at sunset. Darkness falls over the building site. The sky is filled with stars. There is the blueprint, they say.
Before we learn to deal with things in a given position, they have already changed several times. In this way, we always find out too late what has happened. She never returned to Egypt. There was nothing left. So together, we look to Georges Perec's Species of Spaces.
Space, continuation and end. I would like there to exist places that are stable, unmoving, intangible, untouched and almost untouchable, unchanging, deep-rooted, places that might be points of reference, of departure, of origin.
My birthplace, the cradle of my family, the house where I may have been born, the tree I may have seen grow that my father may have planted the day I was born, the attic of my childhood filled with intact memories.
Such places don't exist. And it's because they don't exist that space becomes a question, ceases to be self-evident, ceases to be incorporated, ceases to be appropriated. Space is a doubt. I have constantly to mark it, to designate it. It's never mine, never given to me. I have to conquer it.
My spaces are fragile. Time is going to wear them away, to destroy them. Nothing will any longer resemble what was. My memories will betray me. Oblivion will infiltrate my memory. I shall look at a few old yellowing photographs with broken edges without recognizing them. The words phone directory available within or snacks served at any hour will no longer be written up in a semicircle in white porcelain letters on the window of the little cafe in the Rue Coquillère.
Space melts like sand running through one's fingers. Time bears it away and leaves me only shapeless shreds. To write, to try meticulously to retain something, to cause something to survive, to wrest a few precise scraps from the void as it grows, to leave somewhere a furrow, a trace, a mark, or a few signs.
Thank you.